Thanks, Belinda. I was just observing the room before I started, and I noticed you've all got a little book there which I think says Cloud Computing for Dummies. I haven't read the book, and I'm hoping that my presentation won't belittle you or take away from the lovely piece of literature that's sitting right there. So I've been invited to come and talk to you about cloud computing, and personally, when a new buzzword comes out in the industry and it gets bandied around amongst the press, technology people, it often loses meaning or holds different meaning to the people who hear it. And I think this is one of the terms that's been coined recently that is now being attached to a whole bunch of things that's happening online. So what I wanted to do was really not talk specifically around cloud computing, but in effect demystify this concept of the cloud and give you my perspective on where I think it's going to come from and where I think it's heading and what I think are the opportunities for you all here in the room. So Belinda alluded to the fact that I've also got a psychology and philosophy background as well as technology. And what I wanted to do before just leading into this presentation was think about what it takes to actually design for the future, what we need to know in order to understand these emerging technologies. And I think in this scenario, it's really good to stand back and observe the past. Have a little bit of a look what's happened in the computer industry with the internet over the last 10 years. In effect, choosing determinism. So this is a photo that was taken on the 1st of January 2000 for the dawn of the new millennium. And I was drawn to this image because it really does two things. It sets us back 10 years. It takes us back a decade in computing. And it also is the dawn of a new day or a new era in relation to what's possible with technology. And this is actually a magazine I found at home. When I was working on this presentation, I pulled this out of a drawer I had in my bedroom. And this is a NetGuide magazine from June 2000. And there's a few things that are really interesting here. You'll notice here it says, soon, surf the web on your mobile. That was an emerging trend that was coming out a decade ago. Talks about New Zealand net entrepreneurs and what their secret is. You notice faces amongst them, people like Sam Morgan. See down here, how to avoid defamation on the net, so it was even starting back then. And how to prevent illnesses and other things about, now you can even download movies. So when we think about this stuff now, we can laugh, we can sort of look back and reflect. But really we can take cues from what was happening back 10 years ago. And if we open inside the centre of this magazine, there's actually an article here about these particular New Zealanders who are making money on the internet. And the thing that was compelling about this point in time was that the tech market in the US had just crashed. The bubble had just burst and all these people had lost money because they'd effectively overinvest in this prospect of what was the internet, and then there wasn't enough backing or real substance to hold it all up, so it all kind of fell down. And what we were looking at, we're a bit immune to that down here in New Zealand. We're a long way away from the problems that were happening overseas. And these faces were identified as some of the people who were really getting up and pursuing the opportunity. Now, you recognise this guy here. You recognise Sam Morgan. What's interesting here is 24. He's a director of TradeMe.co.nz. It's an auction and classified site, staff number 3. And if you have a look at his ambitions, in 3 or 4 years we want to be one of the top 3 e-commerce brands in New Zealand. So that's not worldwide domination, that's really being one of the top 3 here, at a time when the internet was in its infancy and there were actually hardly any websites operating online. And if you actually look at this, he just spotted an opportunity. He was working for Deloitte, saw a hole in the market, looking at sites in the US, thought there was an opportunity here. So effectively looking offshore, taking that knowledge and applying it in our local market. This guy here, Daniel Williams, is a mate of mine. And at the time when I was at university, I was learning all about the internet, the e-commerce, how to do all these things online, at a time when nobody else was doing it. And it was somewhat unique because we could take our learnings and we could apply them in the real world, in business here in New Zealand. And then we could take those ideas and go global. So we set up a company with 4 other friends of mine, so it was 5 friends. And we really started to build what was the early e-commerce and the early infrastructure that sat behind a lot of New Zealand sites, but also a lot of international sites, and brought a lot of people together. And as we did this, at that time, the staff count was 2 because 3 of us had already left, moved on to other things. But we were really, starting to see computers for the first time and then use them on a scale which was just global and quite phenomenal. So what I was alluding to here is, at that point, 10 years ago in the early 2000s, it was really an opportunity of right place, right time, right opportunity. The skills were there, the technology had evolved and was ready for people to engage with it. And anyone who had the time or the opportunity to engage was able to pick things up and just get going. There was no huge barrier to entry. It wasn't a lot of expensive equipment. There wasn't a lot of things you had to invest in up front. It was really just being able to spot it, take the time to understand it, and then apply the thinking and the insights to get started. But there was also a few things that were coming out in this same magazine, which were talking about future trends. They were talking about what was going to happen in the next 10 years. And this particular article stuck with me. They were talking about the death of the PC, the fact that we weren't going to have computers on our desks anymore, because experts are telling the editor that web-enabled mobile devices are going to make computers redundant. Now, we still believe this. This is still something that is common, is the observations of analysts who are looking across our segment. They're still saying the computer is dead. It's going to be replaced by a bunch of different mobile devices. And to think that this line of thinking was 10 years old is quite interesting when you realise how slowly things actually move, but then how they appear very quick as well. If you actually have a look at the ads that were alongside that particular article, it was about the brand new Nokia 71010, which could surf the net. Vodafone's talking about it, and it's up there, and this is the device that was actually leading people to think that particular way. Now, it seems crazy now when you think about modern cell phones and modern equipment, but the thinking was there, which was really the spark to lead the market in a certain direction. So what I'm alluding to here is this concept that I've been thinking a little bit about, which is really around convergence. It's around lots of things coming together and becoming one. So you go back another couple of decades, you think about the 80s. These devices were all very common. Ghetto blasters, Donkey Kong gaming machines, VCRs. These were the high-tech devices of the time. And then if we roll forward, they all come together and one other device comes out and replaces all of those disparate purpose devices. If we think about media, and media is an interesting area because media is what generates a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention from people all over the world. And if you think about this concept of media convergence, it's a theory in communications where every mass medium eventually merges to a point where they become one medium due to the advent of new technologies. So we're talking about newspapers, TV, online, all of these things effectively forming to a single voice or a single communication channel. But it's not actually the reduction of devices, but it's the actual expansion of channels to content combinations. So what I mean by that, it's not about having less things where people get the news. It's about having more things that deliver the same news to people where it's convenient to them, whether it's in a physical newspaper, whether it's on a computer screen or on a mobile device. It's having the systems that can do all of those things. So if we take TVNZ here in New Zealand, they're a good example where this is really playing out. They have their on-demand service, which is really like their catch-up TV. You can come to their website, PlayStation 3, you can watch TV that you've missed online. They've got a mobile application, so you can get it on your iPhone when you're out on the go. They've got an iPad application for reading and consuming content. They've released TiVo, which is really a set-top box where you can record programs when you want to watch them. And we've also got integration with Windows 7, Xbox Media Center for watching and recording and replaying live TV as well. So it's all about the same content, but it's about all the different ways that you might want to put it out there and consume it. So then I sort of thought about this and I linked it back to software. Because I've worked as a developer, as a computer programmer, I really think about what does it mean for software and the way that we interact with technology on our computers and online. And if we go back to 1997, so this is really 13 years ago, what was happening in 97 is we had a client technology, which was really an email client here. We had a web-based technology, which was the web-based version of Hotmail at the time. Now, these things were totally different. They were disparate, and there was no real connection between the two. If we go forward a decade, we notice that the client technology has evolved. It's become a bit more functional, a bit sharper. And the web technology has evolved too. So it's a lot more functional and sharper. And it's a consistent delivery of the same information across both the client and the web. And then also the advent of the mobile phone, the ability to actually have that email pushed out to you on a mobile device. So this is what we were seeing around in 2007. If we come forward again to 2010, same thing. We see the enhancement of the client software. We see the enhancement of the web software. And we also see a new interface and a new type of mobile device, which is the Windows Phone 7 that we've just released recently. So this is available on Vodafone here. And it's just effectively the new version of the mobile phone. So we're not seeing a lot of change really between 2007 and 2010. We're seeing enhancing the experience, the delivery, and the look and feel, but we're seeing the similar trends. But then, if I look about software conversion, I think it's not about the reduction of solutions, but the expansion of presentation and information to user combinations. So this is actually meaning that it's becoming more complicated to reach people the way that they want to be reached. If you think about a not-for-profit organisation, you now have to go and do things on Facebook because there's audiences out there that you specifically want to reach. You want to be on a mobile phone because there's people who only use the mobile phone to interact with the internet or services. You want to be on a desktop, you want to be on a TV, you want to be all of these places. And that actually imposes a challenge for organisations which are not really large. So this is where this concept or this view of cloud computing really comes in. It's how can we actually use large technology solutions to deliver the channel to get the information to people through all the ways that you want to reach them. If we think about examples of really large-scale infrastructure on the internet that does this quite well, we're going to think of Facebook. It's a great example of something which you can get via a web interface, via mobile phones, via TVs, via desktop computers. And it's one interface that can actually pull together amongst all those different channels. Think about YouTube, another great example. You don't really think about where the information is stored. You don't think about how it gets scaled across the world, how it gets delivered to the people who want to receive it. It just happens. You don't really... It's like power. When power comes up at your home, you're not necessarily thinking about how it was generated. Oh, some people will be thinking about how it was generated, sorry. But you're not necessarily worried about whether it's going to be there or not be there or run out. You kind of know that you turn it on and most chance, 99% chance it's going to work. And if it doesn't, well, it's, the uncommon experience as opposed to the norm. So I like this image here. This really stood out for me because it's a swarm of blackbirds, and you notice there's one little one out of place down the bottom there. But what it talks to me about is this idea of economies of scale. And I think what's happening with this technology, with the internet, is that we're getting into an era where it's very hard to compete with people who are investing billions of dollars building global infrastructure to deliver these experiences to people all over the world, and then effectively selling that service at small licensing, small subscription costs to meet the money they've invested in infrastructure. So we're going to this idea where maybe 10 years ago, a small organisation with a few servers in an office halfway up the street or in another city would suffice, to a global market now where your information has to be quick, available to everybody really all around the world. And as the internet gets faster, we're getting more connected. And the costs come down as we have these large organisations that are really investing in making sure that things are always on, always available, and always there for you as a consumer, as a user, or as somebody who's creating solutions. And that really is this concept of cloud computing. It's the economies of scale of bringing all of these things together and then making them disappear. And that's why it's really hard to illustrate, because it's something that sits back that you don't really see. It's like turning the tap on and seeing the water flow. It's not like worrying about, how to capture the water or fill the dam. But behind this is a whole revolution in data centers. It's this whole concept of these green data centers that are super efficient, that use less power, that actually save the environment and bring all this computing power together in a way that isn't as damaging as, saying, having 4, 5, 6 or 7 servers plugged in a fully air-conditioned office, somewhere downtown. And what's happening is you used to buy servers by the handful, then you bought them by the rack, and now you buy them by the container. And these containers just have power and cooling. They plugged in, and they're pretty much left alone. I mean, this one's got a door for demonstration purposes, but very often you'd never enter these things. These would be closed environments that would be dropped somewhere, plugged in, and then that's it. Never really thought about again. No one would actually ever go in there or see the physical equipment. And this is what we're moving to, which sits behind this concept of cloud computing. And then the services, this is where the opportunities really start to change. Because once the data centers have been built and once the environments are set up, then the services and the products actually start to sit on top of that and are made available all over the world. So this here is Office 365. We've announced this quite recently. And this is really bringing together what we're calling the cloud versions of all of our communication and collaboration products. So Office, Professional, Exchange, SharePoint, communication servers, video conferencing, Presence, all of these things really being offered through a web browser via a subscription. You don't need to buy the software or license the software. You don't need to buy the servers or worry about the power or the bandwidth or those sort of things. You just really sign up to the subscription, configure your account, and add the number of users in your organization that makes sense for you. And in some ways, what we're doing is we're managing all of this through our back-end infrastructure and these data centers that I was talking about before. So it's another option. It's not like the only solution, but it's really about saying, well, what is it if you don't want to actually run your own infrastructure, if you don't want to have your own IT in-house or even hosted close by, how could we operate with some of these opportunities that are kind of emerging in the market? Now, I talked to Belinda beforehand, and she was saying that we do have charity pricing for all of our online and cloud services. And there's going to be more detail about these things later in the day. So I encourage you to attend the Windows Live session and also the session that is being delivered on CRM Online and SharePoint to get a feel for some more detail that sits in behind these solutions. So with that, that's my presentation and what I wanted to say.